This is the Green Card Application Guide, Change of Status from Canadian TN to U.S. Permanent Resident through your spouse. Part 2 of 3. Application process, timing, and the interview. In Part 1, I detailed how to apply for the Green Card. In this part, I'll go over the application processing phase, how long it took, and what the in-person interview was like. Let's jump straight into the timeline. I FedEx shipped my application mid to late March, and USCIS received the application and logged it into their system the next business day. About a week after mailing the packet, the USCIS cashed a $1,760 check, and my wife and I received mailed letters from the Department of Homeland Security with several Form I-797C notices of action, all stating, quote, "The above case has been received by our office and is in process," close quote. One addressed to my wife, the I-130, and then 3 addressed to me, the I-131, I-485, and the I-765. Around this time, I also received an appointment notice for a biometric scan. 2 to 3 weeks later, I went to the local USCIS office for the fingerprint scanning, making sure that I brought the appointment notice, my passport, and a second form of identification. At the end of April, a little over a month after submitting the application, I received another I-797C notice of action requesting me to appear for an interview at the beginning of June. That was exciting news. On interview day at the beginning of June, about 2.5 months after submitting the application, I went for the interview and brought my wife and everything the I-797C had requested and some. I brought along color copies of some of our text messages, along with photos from our relationship and our wedding. You can't be too prepared for this interview. So what happened during the interview? Well, we sat in the waiting room for about half an hour before being called forward. The interview itself lasted about 40 minutes and was very thorough and quite intense. I recommend reviewing all of your application material in advance so all of your personal information is fresh in your memory. They looked across the I-130 and I-485 applications and asked both my wife and I to verify information on the application out loud. Some of this was actually surprisingly difficult because there's quite a bit of information in these packets. They asked me about I-485 Part 8, general eligibility and inadmissibility grounds, asking for a verbal answer for each question, probably to check if I was honest on the application. The immigration officer took notes on the application as we answered some of the questions. And towards the end of the interview, the officer notified us that the doctor had made an error on the sealed I-693 form and that it needed to be corrected by the doctor and resent by mail before they could revisit and judge my application. That was really frustrating because I had spent hours making sure that everything was filled out correctly, and the I-693 doctor section was the only part I couldn't check, having been sealed. At the end of the interview, the officer gave us 3 letter notices. Notice of interview results, quote, "Your case is being held for review," close quote, because of the previous mentioned issues. Request for evidence, describing the problem with the I-693 form and how to correct it. And notification of Section 216 to person filing for spouse if married less than 2 years when adjusted. This letter was saying that if approved, I'm only a conditional permanent resident, meaning I will need to submit I-751 within 90 days of the 2-year anniversary of the green card expiration date. The reason I was classified as conditional is that my wife and I had been married for under 2 years when we submitted the green card application. At this point, we left the interview not knowing whether we would need to come back for a second time. A day later, I resubmitted Form I-693 with the corrections requested by USCIS. A day after that, my wife received an I-797 notice of action for the I-130 form, indicating that the petition had been approved, but that my application was still pending review. We weren't out of the woods yet, but we felt like we were getting close. After a long 5 weeks, in mid-July, almost 4 months after submitting the application, I received an I-797 notice of action notifying that my green card application had been approved and that I was to receive the green card within 3 weeks. That was very exciting. And actually, the next letter I opened in the stack of mail had the green card in it, so it must have been mailed at around the same time as the notice. The mailer included the green card, an RFID protective sleeve for the card, and a "Welcome to the United States Guide for New Immigrants" leaflet. Overall, the process was a little less smooth than I had hoped. but in general, it went well and quite quickly. My lawyer said to expect an 8-month turnaround, and I've heard horror stories about how long it can take to get a green card, so I feel fortunate that it only took about 4 months to receive mine. That's part 2 of this series. Tune in for part 3 for a list of my tips and lessons learned to help you submit a more accurate application and to help you prevent rejections or delays of your application.